Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Maurice Severson.
And I'm Rachel Sheldon, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs. And today is November 19th, 2013, and this is a call-in show, and we invite your calls to the number shown below.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup, often at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup at Barley's for happy hour after the show for food, drink, and conversation. To look for us, just find the silver jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee monthly activities are on the first and third Sunday mornings. They're usually lectures with a lively roundtable discussion. The second Sunday is a book club. The fourth Sunday is the Reflections Gathering, which is a potluck afternoon gathering at a member's home.
And today our topic is God's sexist. We'll be talking about the overt sexism in the Bible. But first, we've got some news. In Springfield, Illinois, on Monday, November the 18th, the governor, Pat Quinn, signed a gay marriage bill into law. It's not a big deal for most people, unless you're gay, live in Illinois, and maybe want to get married. But there's something else going on, something very old, very dark, and very evil. According to Bishop Thomas Paprocki and maybe Supreme Court Justice Scalia, Satan and his minions have taken over the Capitol, and these are not the cute minions from the movie, and are positioning their followers to spread demon seed all over Illinois. Sound far-fetched, then considering the following. The Catholic Church, led by the sage Bishop Paprocki, will be holding exorcisms for the purpose of thwarting the Dark One's plans.
I'm pretty sure I read that comic somewhere.
I'm pretty sure.
And Bishop Paprocki has said that priests and church members would be welcome November 20th to say to what he calls prayers of supplication and exorcism in reparation for the sin of same-sex marriage at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. Demon seed.
Yes, exactly.
Where we must pray for deliverance from this evil which has penetrated our state and church.
Not to say that the Catholic Church has any obsession with sex or anything.
Yeah, this... has this been sanctioned by the new liberal pope, you ask? Well, sort of. The bishop cites Pope Francis, who, while still a bishop in Argentina, said that the legalization of same-sex marriage was a move of the father of lies to confuse and deceive the children of God. And the church is experiencing a resurgence in exorcisms lately and has been recruiting more and more priests to perform the ancient rite. I do remember it was pretty big when they did say, Mother Teresa, and this is in the past, several decades, was exorcised regularly.
Okay.
Well, apparently she had...
According to Christopher Hitchens, it didn't work, but...
yeah, it was pretty funny because she... yeah.
We are introducing the show right now, and so if you could bear with us for a moment, that would be great.
Oh, hi, I'm calling in because I'm supposed to be a guest.
Yes, absolutely. And we're just doing some in the news segments first.
Sure.
And we are
How long will
live.
that be?
Just a few minutes.
Thanks, Ms. Gaylor.
Okay.
Thank you so much for calling. We're currently going through the exorcisms that the bishop of in Illinois is going to be hosting against gay marriage. So.
Oh, yes. Wait a second. Hold on.
Go ahead.
But yeah, Mother Teresa, apparently she thought her doubt was related to demons, so she tried to, that's why she went through so many exorcisms, was to try to get rid of the doubt.
Yeah.
And,
I might have.
yeah. And
I think I...
this is the typical church, idea, and it's as old as, the first person. Yeah, precisely. And evil beings have taken up residence, and And I guess you could argue that, since they're, not being stopped, then, maybe if you think there is a God, that maybe he wants it.
Yeah, I mean, it gets into that whole, if God is omniscient and knows everything that's going to happen, and it's quote-unquote everything is part of God's plan because he knows everything all the way through time, then if this is happening, doesn't it have to be part of his plan?
Mm-hmm. Of course, you do have people like the Jehovah's Witnesses that say, go on with it, it'll bring forth the end of the world.
Exactly. But we're very lucky today to have a guest caller, Laurie Gaylor, who is with the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Yeah, she's the co-founder along with her mother, and her husband, Dan Barker, is the current co-president. And also, she's an accomplished author. She's the editor of Free Thought Today. She has a radio show. And so I guess she has her fingers in a lot of pies, in media. Oh, definitely. And I know I've read her book, Woe to the Women, about women in the Bible.
Which is our topic today, the overt sexism in the Bible. And Laurie, are you available there?
I am.
Okay, what we're going to do first, I think, is go ahead and queue up a audio segment we have of an interview. I believe you were 24, discussing with, who was she interviewed by? But discussing the sexism in the Bible and the role of women in the Bible.
Sheila Thompson.
With Sheila Thompson, that's what it was.
Just as she graduated from college, she was just as passionate then as she is today about the harm of religion to women.
Laurie Gaylor is a recent graduate of the University of Wisconsin in Madison, an award-winning journalist in college. She now is the publisher and editor of a new feminist monthly newspaper. She has been an activist for women's rights since she was in junior high school.
I understand you're a third-generation freethinker. How has that affected you?
I call myself a third-generation freethinker. I feel fortunate that I was brought up in a household free from religion because I've seen the pain that religion has brought friends of mine when they've tried to cut the umbilical cord. Even though I was skeptical about the Bible, I was shocked at what I read about its treatment of women, and I think that it would outrage people who've been brought up to believe the Bible is a good book.
You said women would be outraged. Why would they be, Laurie?
Women would be outraged if they read the Bible because it's one gigantic put-down of women. From the first chapters of Genesis, the Bible establishes that women are unclean, that they're inferior to men, and that men should rule over them. The favored version of creation says that woman is created from man's spare rib, that she's an appendage to man. Women in the Bible are owned by men and can be sold into slavery by men. They can even be sacrificed. We've all read about the story of Abraham, who nearly sacrifices his son Isaac to please God. But how many of us have heard of the story of Jephthah and his daughter, whom he does actually sacrifice? We haven't heard this story because women and their lives in the Bible are not considered important. Women can even be raped with impunity in the Bible.
Is there a particular Bible passage that bothers you the most?
The most grisly passage in the Bible deals with a concubine whose master throws her into a crowd of unruly men in order to save his own skin. She's raped all night long, and then she's found at his doorpost dead the next morning. Instead of mourning her or feeling any guilt for his cowardly act in sacrificing her, the man cuts her up into 12 pieces and starts a war. The message of the Bible is clear that she was only a piece of his property and that if he causes her death, that's all right. The Bible sanctions men to have concubines. Men could also use their bondswomen sexually. Wise King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines, so that the Bible also allows polygamy. Men could have as many wives as they wanted, but women could only marry one man.
But these things that you've mentioned now have just been the Old Testament. What did Jesus have to say?
Jesus upheld every jot and tittle of the Mosaic Law, which gives provisions for multiple marriage. He tells a parable about 10 virgins all waiting for the same bridegroom, and he doesn't express any disapproval of this at all.
What else does the Bible say about marriage?
The Bible has some grossly unfair rules about marriage. One of the first rules about marriage is that a woman must be a virgin on her wedding night. If she's not, her father and the men of the village are supposed to stone her to death. A man does not need to be a virgin. Another grossly unfair rule is that a man can divorce his wife by just simply handing her a bill of divorcement. She can't protest. She can't herself divorce her husband, even if he's beating her or there are any other circumstances like that. And the New Testament, Jesus does not do anything to make this inequity better. He says there shall be no divorce unless the woman is an adulteress. If the man's an adulterer, she can't divorce him.
Annie, Laurie, clarify something for me. Just what does the Bible say about abortion?
Ironically, the Bible doesn't say anything about abortion at all. It's totally silent on the subject. Instead, you'll find passages such as, their infants shall be dashed in pieces and their women with child shall be ripped up. This hardly promotes respect for life. There is a church that cites 5 passages in the Bible that it claims are anti-abortion. But the passages are all similar to, behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. This is hardly persuasive. What you will find in the Bible that is ammunition against abortion rights is that women are supposed to suffer when they're pregnant. They're supposed to bring forth children in agony, and this is what promotes the anti-abortion ideology.
Well, what about the other women in the Bible?
Women in the Bible are basically evil. There are only 2 books that are named for women. Ruth, who is the ultimate passive woman. She acts as a doormat in order to win a second husband. And then there's Esther, who's responsible for killing 75,000 people, and that's why she's honored. The only feminist in the Bible is Queen Vashti, who is quickly dethroned when she refuses to subject herself to her husband and display herself before a mob of drunken companions at a dinner. And this is the only honorable woman in the Bible that I've found.
What do you think women should be doing about this sexist book?
I think that women and men should read the Bible so that they have first-hand acquaintanceship with what it says about women. They should judge this book on its merits like any other book. And I think that they'll find that a fair-minded person will not want the Bible to be invoked in any of our laws about women. The Bible has tremendous impact on women's lives today because the Bible teaches that women are inferior, and nearly 40% of the population in America believes that this Bible is literally true word for word. Therefore, fighting the Equal Rights Amendment and equal rights for women in general has become a religious crusade.
And that was Sheila Thompson.
And we're back. And thanks for hanging in with us, Annie Laurie Gaylor. And we can take calls now. And thanks for hanging on with us. And I'm kind of curious, while we're waiting for a call, can you tell me what your personal definition of feminist is and how it relates to your lack of religion?
Yeah, the definition of feminist that I've always used is someone who supports the social, political, and educational equality of women. And I think that's, who could oppose that? And the feminist movement was really sparked by free-thinking women, the unorthodox, and the women rebels against religion, because it was the injunction to keep silent in the churches and to keep silent in general that was keeping women so oppressed. And every right that women had to win, whether it was wearing bicycles or voting, was opposed by the churches. And so I think that we owe a great debt to the free-thinking women who really sparked and nurtured the women's movement.
Yeah, and I think one thing that people tend to forget, everybody sort of chuckles now at the craziness of Iran saying that
Women can't drive cars.
Because it'll hurt their reproductive system. What a lot of people don't realize is at the beginning of the 20th century, the same argument was used for women playing basketball. Against playing basketball.
and it is still used in this country. There was a lawsuit against Johnson Controls saying that because women, the high-paying jobs dealt with, I think, exposure to lead, and they said, well, women shouldn't have those because they might hurt their ability to reproduce. And it's like, well, it's not really good for the men either, but they didn't want to point that out. So.
And we do have a caller, and thanks for being on Freethought Forum. May I have a nickname or a name?
Matthew.
Pardon me, could you say that again?
Matthew.
Well, thanks for being up with us, Matthew, and do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a couple. Well, I have a comment about your previous caller. when she was talking about women in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and she saw no women that were viable, maybe two. But what about Mary, the mother of Jesus? What about Mary Magdalene? There's many examples of women in the Bible, but it just seems like that you guys are on one course. But
Okay.
that's my comment. But I want to ask another question of you too, if possible. The woman on the left,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm watching TV, what is your belief? What is atheism?
Okay, and that's for me.
I see. Is God sexist? But atheists are supposedly have nothing to do with God, right?
Well, but it's more we're asking, is a lot of people's definition of God a sexist God? And if you look through the Bible, you see things are... I just finished reading Umberto Eco's book, The Name of the Rose. It's based in medieval Italy. And
I know the book.
yeah.
Trust me, I know the book.
And also, and you know what? There is one female character in there. There are many references to women. Of all the references to women, the only good one comes with regret later.
Yeah.
And also, if you in another book, Laurie Gaylor's book, Well Into Women, you should read that. I mean, look what happened to Jezebel. I mean, and arguably, Isaac Asimov actually wrote about it in one of his robot books. If you look at it, you could look at her as a faithful wife who followed her own religion to the best of her ability. And in Isaiah, he was worshiping his God to the best of his ability, and look who won.
Can I get a comment on Mary?
Right, that's what I was going to ask.
The mother of-
Laurie, he's
Yes, I heard
asking
that,
about
and
your take on Mary and Mary Magdalene as well.
I wrote a book called Woe to the Women, the Bible Tells Me So. The Bible, Female Sexuality, and the Law, for those of us who are too non-masochistic to have to read the Bible for ourselves. But I toyed with calling the book, instead of Woe to the Women, I toyed with calling it Woman, What Have I to Do with Thee? And perhaps your caller recognizes this scornful question that is directed by Jesus to his mother. And you may remember this story in the book of John, where Mary points out to her son Jesus that the guests at the wedding have no wine to drink. And he replies to her, Woman, what have I to do with thee? And I think that scornful, haughty response, this not a very nice response to his mother, is really sort of encapsulating the Bible's treatment of women. And it shows that the character of the person that Christians today term their Savior, it has contempt for women. And this is throughout the Bible. And
Okay, but do you
Jesus
deny...
does not repudiate the sexism of the Bible. In fact, he says he came to uphold every jot and tittle of the Mosaic.
But what about somebody like me that prays to Mary every night, that prays to Hail Mary and prays the Mary prayers every night? Because I believe that she is equally as holy as Jesus.
Because she's a virgin.
Well, okay, so let's look at what else Jesus says.
No, I'm talking about
proud
Jesus.
cries
I'm talking about
out, bless
Mary
the
right
womb that
now,
bare thee,
no?
and the paps which thou hast sucked. And Jesus says, no, rather blessed are they that hear the word of God and keep it. And what difference does it make if somebody prays to Mary, but he belongs to a church that preys on women, as the Roman Catholic Church does, which I would regard as enemy number one of women's rights, trying to take away reproductive rights and birth control, and saying women
Even
cannot
condom
be
use.
priests.
Although some evangelicals actually they don't want you to even have a job anymore, because your job is to be at home and bear children
And not wear pants
and
and
not
keep
wear-
your hair long.
Come on. I mean, I'm calling in as pure interest, for dialogue.
Then we're
That's all.
happy
That's
to
why I'm
do
not
that.
calling to argue and have this girl on the right say, where that all men are racist. You know, they want the women to be in the kitchen and stuff. That's not me.
We didn't say that. We said that the teachings of some churches are based on that, and they are.
Have you ever heard of the Quiverful movement?
No, I've not.
I'd invite you to, Google, see what you find, even though there are, seemingly mainstream churches in the area that preach the exact same thing. And except, maybe they're not connected with the movement, but they still have the same mentality.
Okay. Well, tell me what, if you don't mind, if I can ask just one last question.
Mm-hmm.
What is an agnostic and what is an atheist?
Generally, most of us would say we are both atheists and agnostics. Agnostic, the word gnosos, has to do with knowledge.
No, just tell me the definition.
I'm trying to.
Don't go back into Greek and...
No, I'm trying to. I'm saying
tell me your definition.
It has to do with knowledge. The question that agnosticism is answered by is saying, do you know if there's a God? And to me,
that's Gnosticism, right?
That's right. The question, to me, everyone should be an agnostic because we can't know. Even if you're a Christian, you should say, I don't know for sure that there's a God.
Exactly.
So everyone could be an agnostic, whether you're a theist or an atheist. The question is then, basically, what is your belief?
Yes, ma'am.
And my belief is that I see no good evidence, and therefore I do not believe in a God. Can I prove that there are no unicorns either? No. But I don't believe that they exist because I see no evidence. Okay. For me, that is the same thing for God.
Of atheism.
It is a belief. It is a lack of belief in a God. Exactly.
Any God.
Okay.
Right, any God, not just the Christian God, but the Zeus, Yahweh,
Krishna,
Allah, Krishna. There have been thousands of gods in the history of the world.
Atheism is just a pure acknowledgement that there's no higher power, right?
Well, it depends on what you mean by higher power,
or just the practice of that.
Exactly.
I would say
we don't pray to anything. We don't believe that there are supernatural things. So, but we appreciate you calling, and you know.
How about UFOs? You know, where do they fit?
I guess we're agnostic about that, but thank you for calling.
I appreciate you calling.
No problem.
Thanks.
The girl on the left is beautiful, by the way. She is.
Yes, she is.
She is beautiful.
I'm flattered. Bye.
And we're going to take a quick mid-program break here, or no? Yes, no.
Yes, no, maybe.
Never mind. We'll get back to
Annie Laurie,
and our discussion of is God sexist? And most of our evidence, I think, we bring from the Bible. So,
one of my favorite examples is actually a story from Judges. There's this big battle in this town in Israel, and there's this woman who's on this tower. She gets a clay vessel, drops it on a guy who's fighting with another man. He's struck in the head. He's taken down. He's laying there bleeding, and one of the fighters that's on the same side of him says, "I don't want it written down or to be said that I was killed by a woman. Stab me and kill me now."
What do you think, Annie Laurie? Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Fairly typical of the Bible. So how do you think that your belief system came into play? Kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg? Do you think you were a feminist and that helped to lead you to examine the fact that the Bible and religious belief is so antithetical to everything having to do with the mere idea that women are equal? Or was it that your atheism then led to an interest in feminism?
Well, actually, I'm a third-generation freethinker on my mother's side of the family, so I was brought up without religion, without indoctrination. I wasn't told I had to believe in a particular deity. I wasn't indoctrinated or proselytized to as a child, although living in a religion-drenched society, one does, cannot escape religion. So I was aware of it, but I was also aware that the family did not go to church and had intellectual reasons for disbelieving. And we were brought up to think critically, and my parents very much felt that children should be respected and allowed to grow up until they're old enough to make up their own minds for themselves about religious claims, instead of forcing all of these neurotic ideas and abstractions that children cannot possibly weigh and evaluate upon them when they're so young.
Okay.
And my mother also was a role model because I came of age at the time of the women's movement, and she was a very strong feminist, the first to write an editorial calling for legalized abortion in the state of Wisconsin, and started a group. And I followed her around when I was in junior high school, and that was one thing that she did, not indoctrinate me, but felt we clicked on that very much. But I think the fact that we were both non-religious meant that it was very easy to gravitate to the early women's movement.
Okay,
Awesome.
and we do have a caller. Hey, and you're on the air, caller. May we have a name or nickname?
Yes, this is Charles.
Charles?
Called in before.
Thanks for calling in, Charles, and for holding on with us. Do you have any questions or comments?
The closest thing Jesus had to say about anything that had to do with equality between men and women was about the woman that married a man. He died, and he married his brother, and he died, and so on, through 7 brothers. And which Jesus was questioned about whose husband was in heaven by one of the Pharisees. And his response is, neither there will be angels in heaven, which doesn't do women any good here in the real world.
Yeah, it's all after we're purified, and and it seems to be a common thing. Women are always dirty, unless they're Mary, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I find real interesting is that David, beloved of the Lord, there's several rather strange stories about his sexuality. Specifically something to do with the son of Saul.
Jonathan.
And, Jonathan, how he stripped himself naked one day in front of him, and that between them there was a love greater than any woman had for any man, and so forth.
Yeah, do you have any comments on that, Annie Laurie?
Well, I could say a couple of things about that. Certainly, the Bible has engendered a great deal of homophobia because of the Mosaic laws that are so barbaric, that their blood shall be upon them if somebody is homosexual. But then there is this contradiction. The Bible is full of contradictions. Kind of role model of gay love. And also, you asked about this parable about polygamy, which Jesus tells without any kind of censure. And I do also take great umbrage against this idea that there are 10 virgins all waiting for the same bridegroom. And Jesus talks about 5 of them being wise and 5 foolish. And, the whole thing is put down.
Yeah.
And certainly he should have said, wait a minute, why should one man own 10 women? And again, this is an example where the Jesus of the Bible was given a chance to, if he indeed existed, or the writers who conjured him up were given a chance to denounce the more barbaric laws in the Old Testament, and he failed to do so. Because the Bible is full of, the Old Testament is full of examples of, wise King Solomon had, was it 700 wives and 300 concubines, or the other way around?
The other way around.
This is where the original Mormon Church got its ideas.
Yeah. Now, there's also indications from archaeology and other areas that the original tribal gods of the original Hebrews had a wife, the name of Asher, and that the tribe of Asherah was named after her, okay? But the Levite tribe, or the leaders of the tribe, did what was, for essentially speaking, a religious coup against the rest of the tribes, and they were very, very male chauvinistic in their way. And there are indications of that. Somewhere in the New Old Testament is the fact that at Shiloh, the very first place in the, quote, Holy Land that the Jews had a temple was, in fact, had female attendants, as I recall.
I'll have to look that up. I'm a big fan of archaeology. I'll have to look and see what that is. I do remember PBS aired a program a few years ago about that showed some archaeological evidence, and it was from people from a religious college, but they found that a lot of evidence suggesting that that the Israelites never, or the Hebrews never moved from Egypt into the area. They were just stragglers that sort of bound together to survive from the collapse of the city-states in the area.
Right. I just saw not long ago that the oldest established statement for Israel was a statement in a conquest hieroglyph from Egypt from 1280 BC, or Common Era, BCE Common Era, before Common Era. And so I find this whole area of what the rewrite of 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 the Testament, both Old and New, has been edited so many times that nobody's actually certain just which sections are original.
Very true. Very true. When you're dealing with a population that was mostly illiterate, and
it was all oral tradition.
Yeah, all oral tradition for centuries, and
then being in exile in Babylon and absorbing all of that culture.
Yeah.
The thing I find amazing is how few people notice that there was a judge, a pre-dynasty judge of Israel, according to the Bible, by the name of Ruth. So apparently, the females of at least one tribe had kind of authority that the judges had in the pre-Saul dynasties.
And of course, Deborah's pretty popular, or most people who read the Bible are familiar with her.
Yeah, but they don't understand what that implies.
Yeah.
That back then, women had, at least some of them, had exceptional status.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think, Annie, Laurie, you would agree that generally the idea that women ever had any status was pretty suppressed by most of the Bible, don't you think?
Oh, yes. I think that there's no question that there were religions that had a lot of goddesses. And there are certainly, there are scholars who are more scholarly than I am who can kind of trace things in the current Bible that show the attempt to get away from that. And I think that they could never really get away from it. That's why Christianity does indeed elevate Mary and mother and child. Our society naturally cottons to this image of a family and mothers and babies, and the Catholic Church couldn't really get away with it, so they embraced it. Couldn't get people
if
to
you can't beat them, join them.
give it up.
However, most of the fertility gods, or goddesses, they had kids, and I think Mary really stands out because, they put such an emphasis on the fact that she was a virgin.
Yeah.
Well, there is a major problem with that.
Yeah.
A few.
There's this business about that prophecy that a woman shall bear a child, and he shall be super special. And his name would be Emmanuel.
Yes.
I'm not quite certain of which one of the prophets said that, but in the very next paragraph, and a lot of people love missing this, is that the prophet took the young woman to bed so that it would become true.
Yeah.
Because it turns out that the word virgin has multiple different meanings, like the word fool
young
does.
woman, basically, and there's a lot of...
Okay, there's the religious context. In a religious context, a virgin was a woman that served in a temple for a function in Roman society, for instance. And some of them were vestal virgins, i.e. they didn't have sex. And B, some of them were married women that were serving in the temple of Hera. Okay, you had to be married with, a family and so forth to do that. And some of them were elderly women serving in the temples of the goddesses of grain and Demetri and so forth.
Yes.
So when they put together the Bible in response to Maricon, I wouldn't be surprised in the least if there was a lot of weird editing going on.
I don't think we would either, Charles. But I think we're going to go ahead and let you go. We appreciate you calling in, and we're going to get back to our kind of main topic here with Laurie Gaylor. Is God sexist? But thank you so much for calling, and we look forward to you coming again.
Bye. And another big thing is people don't realize that the Catholic Church actually sanctioned abortions up until the time of Napoleon II, and there was actually a deal that went on between him and the Pope at the time. France was in a lot of wars. He agreed to let the Catholic Church teach pretty much everything in France in exchange for the Pope actually banning abortions. And that sort of ties in because Laurie, as I read that you're on the board of the directors of the Women's Medical Fund Incorporated.
Yes.
And can you tell us about that?
Well, the Women's Medical Fund is based here in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was started by my mother, Ann Gaylor, who also was the principal founder of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And the Women's Medical Fund was started before FFRF, and it's the longest-lived, continuously operating abortion rights charity in the country, and has helped over 20,000 women without means in our state pay for abortion care, which is necessary because the Catholic Church and other fundamentalist politicians have cut off abortion funding for women who otherwise qualify for medical assistance. So there's great need out there. There are about 35 states that have cut off abortion care for women getting public assistance. And, of course, the Hyde Amendment that was passed at the impetus of that great Catholic, Henry Hyde, in Congress, cuts off federal funding for poor women as well for abortion.
And, of course, now they're suing to make sure it's not part of health care.
And with birth control,
so that we have abortion care for needy, poor, indigent women held hostage to the doctrine of the Catholic Church. And we are seeing today, unfortunately, this great war against the contraceptive mandate in Obamacare. And here again, it's the Catholic Church and it's the fundamentalist, even Hobby Lobby, which is run by fundamentalists, this craft store that's very political. The Koch brothers are involved. All of these different groups involved in more than 60 lawsuits against the contraceptive mandate, which says that women can't be double billed for contraception as part of our insurance as workers, that birth control should be free, that we shouldn't have to pay extra when we have insurance coverage. And here are men able to get Viagra often for free, and women are paying $90 for more for their a month for their birth control pills.
Yeah, I had to do that when I was on federal assistance or state assistance because I was poor.
It's so wonderfully, it's such a great dichotomy. The same people who don't want you to have an abortion also don't want you to use contraception.
and we do have a caller.
The lawsuits are saying is that if anybody, anywhere, not just a Catholic hospital or a Catholic university, but a Catholic employer, a private employer or a fundamentalist employer has any religious objection at all to any kind of health coverage of their women workers, that they could deny women this coverage. And this would be like saying, yeah, if you work for Jehovah's Witness, you couldn't get a blood transfusion.
Right.
Or if you worked for a Scientologist and you
can't get psychiatric care.
Psychiatric care, you would be denied it. And but for women, the vast majority of victims of this would be women workers who would be denied legal birth control pills or other birth control help, which 98% of women in our country use, which is not controversial, but which is opposed by the Catholics and increasingly by fundamentalist Protestant churches. So it's a very great danger. But at the Women's Medical Fund, we pay part of the cost of the abortion care for indigent women.
That's great.
And so we certainly don't want to see this pool increased because we will have so many more unwanted pregnancies if the contraceptive mandate is overturned.
Okay,
and we do have a caller here.
Thanks, caller. You're on the air. What's your name or nickname?
No, you can call me Dale.
Hey, Dale.
Hey, Laurie, I'd like to say I'm a real fan of your husband's song, The Atheist Blues. I'd like to get that as a ringtone on my phone, but I've been a big fan of his music, especially the good poetry in that song. I got two questions. Without a religious upbringing, Annie, how did you become so well-versed with sexism or the Bible in general? Is it your husband that you credit that to?
No, I did not learn from my husband. I learned on my own. Long before I met Dan, who was an evangelist preacher. You are correct in that. I was a feminist, and I wanted to know. I saw that the principal enemy of women's rights, reproductive rights, was religion. And as a college student, I took a women's studies class, and as my term paper, I decided to read the Bible and write down everything it said about women.
Oh, my gosh. Somebody dedicated
that was the
to a term
genesis
paper.
of the book that I wrote, Woe to the Women, the Bible Tells Me So, about the Bible and sexism. So there's a chapter on every kind of issue, such as marriage and abortion and how women are treated as the unclean sex and the horrible revilement of strange women and prostitutes and the divorce and adultery double standards.
Gosh,
in the Bible
now you're making me
so
want
I
to
read
read
it for
the Bible
myself.
again. Well, one thing I would like to mention regarding a little tidbit I got out of it is perhaps some of this is coming from emulating Jesus himself. He never once called Mary, who the first caller was so adamant over, he never once called her mother, but always called her woman, even though he had used the term mother in some of his parables and such. But I thought, well, maybe if people are going to be emulating what Jesus does, then you would have the child at the kitchen counter holding up his sippy cup and saying, "More Ovaltine, woman."
I know what would have happened to me if I said that as a kid.
And one more thing that you're bringing out, I'm so incensed about all these laws. It's that mainly coming from the Republicans, so wanting to, are so concerned about women's private parts. But I mean, both reproductive and otherwise.
Yeah.
But now we have the situation where the corporations are already declared as persons. You mentioned Hobby Lobby. Now they are wanting to declare their corporation as a person who has a right to religion and also able to influence their workers because of that religion. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I wanted to say that I agreed with you about this contemptuous treatment of Jesus and his mother. And motherhood throughout the whole Bible is treated very contemptuously. And in fact, women are cursed, of course, in Genesis with childbirth, and they're warned that unless, in the New Testament, that unless they're devout, that they will die in childbirth. So just to return to this topic of motherhood and as a curse, which has been a terrible curse for women, that so many women do die still unnecessarily today because of church teachings against contraceptive and abortion. And,
I'm surprised that Hobby Lobby isn't saying that women shouldn't have a right to an epidural, because it says that women should give birth in agony.
And actually, this was a big hot button issue when painkillers and anesthetics were introduced into childbirth. There were a lot of people that said, no, that's not right. The Bible says otherwise. Also,
it makes about as much sense as when churches got upset when Benjamin Franklin invented the lightning rod, because they felt that lightning strikes were the will of God. So.
However, on a related note about Hobby Lobby, since it's now a person, do you think they'll support the right, for the death penalty to be applied to corporations?
Yeah, that's right. Corporations are immortal and can own other corporations, so they're slave masters as well. Hey, listen, let me get off and let somebody else on the line.
Okay,
thanks so
for
much,
calling.
Dan.
Bye.
But I mean, I do think, if they're the typical right-wing person that's, if they're against abortion and birth control, do they feel the same way about the death penalty? Because most of the people who seem to think that are usually pro-death when after a certain age.
Yeah. So, they're also anti-actual health care for the rest of your life, as well as, actually making sure that you've got food, things like that. It's only while you're actually in utero that they seem to care about babies. They once they're out, it's somebody else's responsibility, and if they're not fed, their food stamps should be taken away. If they're not getting good enough grades in our state, we have a senator who introduced that bill that if the children
Mr. Campfield.
if the children aren't achieving well enough, not that they're not trying, but if they're not achieving well enough on their standardized test scores, their food stamps should be taken away from their family.
Also, Ms. Gaylor, so I did also read that you and your husband were on a radio show in Chicago with Oprah.
Oh, we were on a TV show.
Oh, a TV show. Okay, I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. What do you think about, actually meeting her criticism of Ms. Naiad, about saying that...
If you feel awe, you can't be an atheist.
Exactly. This woman who swam miles and miles.
I thought that I was on the show a couple of times before she became really famous. I was on the show when she was part of Baltimore's People Are Talking, and my mother and I were on. And she ran the show and used this tape to audition for her show in Chicago. And we asked the question, is the Bible sexist? And I thought she was a pretty good feminist when I first met her. And I think that as she became more successful, that there was a lot of guilt being heaped on her as a successful, one of the most successful women in the United States. And I think that she felt she had to profess religiosity, and she started to do so. And I think it was very insulting of her to stand there and tell Diana Naiad, the swimmer, that she couldn't be an atheist when Diane was telling her I am. And to say in such a put down that you can't, if you feel awe about nature or awe about beauty, that means you can't be an atheist. Well, that is not the definition of an atheist. That's not the definition of a Christian, and that's just ignorant. So it's disappointing.
It is.
But I think she's a good feminist, and she should be a good enough feminist to realize, as Alice Walker has realized, that the Bible, and as Elizabeth Cady Stanton has realized, that the Bible and the church have been the greatest stumbling blocks in the way of women's emancipation. And she should be proud of her own achievements and not worry about giving any credit to a non-existent deity.
Absolutely.
Okay, we do have a caller. Hello, can we have a name or nickname?
My name is Charles.
Hey, Charles. Do you have any questions or comments to Annie Laurie Gaylor or to us?
I do. I've only tuned in about 15 minutes ago to the program, and I've been listening, and it's a great conversation. And I guess, we can all agree that, the Bible is not the infallible word of God, but the fallible word of man. And so I think to pose the question, atheism, is God sexist, is completely irrelevant to the topic that you're posing for discussion.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I mean, this is more of like a socio-political, male, Eurocentric kind of conversation and really has nothing to do with God.
Well, it's more...
I would disagree because it's the belief in a God and in a patriarchal God that has fueled all of these oppressions, has fueled the campaigns to deny women rights and has kept women subservient historically. And so Mary Daly used to say, as long as God is male, male is God. And if you have a male God and you set up a hierarchy where you have God at the top and then man underneath him and then woman underneath man, of course you are going to have oppression of women. And there is no evidence for this God, and much less the patriarchal God of the Bible. And I think it's very important not to believe in claims for which there is no evidence. If it's not true, why do we believe it? And in fact, it's been so harmful to believe in fairy tales that actually, are harmful, that promote this untruths, that say that there's a hell if you don't believe just as I do, or say that you can only be saved if you believe in a particular God, and that God says women are second-class citizens that were formed from Adam's rib, and that women have to be in silence and so on because we brought sin into the world. That whole story of Adam and Eve. Yeah. Eve was framed, and we have to speak out. I think it's terribly important as feminists to speak out against this notion, this make-believe God.
Yeah. And it's used to justify so much brutality, especially against women in particular, that, women aren't supposed to speak up, and why not, when their husbands are beating them? Well, because that's her role. The Bible says that a woman is supposed to be subservient to her husband, and that's used to justify, lots and lots of violence against women.
For keeping them so they don't have their own income, so if something is going wrong, they can't leave. They can't even help support the family if they're poor.
Yeah. A lot of people think that today it's skewed too much to the side that the mother gets custody of the children. But for a very long time, children were literally the legal property of their father. And so if a woman wanted to leave her abusive husband, she had to also abandon her children.
Which is
out of the Bible.
And does happen a lot still in Muslim countries. Yeah. If you've read Ayaan Hirsi Ali's biography, or autobiography, it's in there.
I just, you're right to say that there is this hierarchy of male dominance in a female's life, but to pose the question, is God sexist, given the fact that God does not exist, then you're not really talking about God being sexist, you're talking about man being sexist.
True. We do have a limited amount of space here.
Whatever premise that hierarchy has come down, whether it's through God or whatever, it's still the man doing it, not God.
Right. But
if you can make up a God and say that this God is issuing edicts, and I'm the person who can interpret this God and speak for God, then you can do anything in God's name. Yeah. It's such a powerful tool. It goes beyond the grave when it says that, I will even send you to hell forever if you don't agree with, this God's teaching. So sexism in religion, it gets its own, it has its own place in being dangerous and damaging.
But under that logic, a woman could create God and completely reverse the hierarchy, in which point man would be subservient. So again,
that's possible.
Question, is God sexist is not accurate to your conversation.
Well,
well, I think that we all know that we're talking about a character in a religion and in a Bible. None of us who is talking about this believes there's such a God.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree. In a strictly, syntactical sense, you're right.
But we are working in 30 characters or less.
Yeah. But we appreciate you calling in. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So we're kind of wrapping up things here. We've got just a few minutes left. Annie Laurie, is there a particular note you'd like to leave us on?
Well, I think that it's very important to speak out against the religion's incursions against women's rights right now. We have never seen more activity in our state legislatures in particular, but also in Congress. In the first half of the year, more than 48 anti-abortion strictures were passed, and
Zero
we have
jobs
to keep fighting against this, which is a real pity to support Roe versus Wade. I've been spending my whole life practically in doing that, and we shouldn't have to be on the defensive, but it is terribly important to speak out, and we hope that people will realize the way to support women's rights is to make sure that religion does not get into our laws and that we have a strict separation of church and state. And I would certainly invite people listening to this conversation to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which I'm a co-founder of, and FFRF.org. We are the nation's largest association of atheists and agnostics, and we're working to keep religion out of government, and would like to work with a louder voice by having even more members and do more and litigate. And we hope you'll ask for a free copy of our newspaper, Free Thought Today.
Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. And of course, you don't have to not believe in God to believe that there should be a separation of church and state. People who are religious can still believe that we don't belong in a theocracy.
And one of my best examples that I use is, well, what would you think if you think it's okay for them to hand out Bibles? How would you feel if a Muslim teacher was handing out,
copies of the Quran, or asking your children to bow
pray five times
toward Mecca 5 times a day, out of respect for their beliefs?
And if you're not okay with that, then you're on the same side as us, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think the Freedom from Religion Foundation is not just a group for atheists and agnostic. It's for everyone who believes that, we've seen what happens when government and religion work together. It leads to crusades and mass slaughters.
Holocausts,
all kinds of wonderful things. And genocides today in Rwanda and around the world. It just has no place in American society.
In Serbia and Kosovo. Where it was, the Christians slaughtering the Muslims.
Yeah, so even if you are a Christian, I think that if you are an American, you should understand that our Constitution guarantees separation of church and state. So we're running a little low on time now. We're getting there. And definitely, I think the guy's point of is God sexist? The point is, what upsets me personally is when people that's always you can't criticize my reasons if my reason is because my God says so. And it's like, well, your God gets to tell you what to do, but he doesn't get to tell me what to do. And that's kind of my point.
Yeah, and definitely, there needs to be more than 46 pages on the list of Wikipedia for atheist feminists.
Definitely. So it's about time to start wrapping things up. If you'll get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee, bringing you 3 years of free thought and growing strong.
Please send us feedback. You can leave a voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email at us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. And you can see the show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station, and 2200 hours Greenwich Mean Time at ctvknox.org.
And we'd like to send our thanks to Sam, Jonas, Larry, and Forrest for our technical support, and especially thanks to our guest today, Annie Laurie Gaylor from the
Freedom from
Religion Foundation, which is a mouthful. So thank you. Remember to examine your beliefs. If those beliefs are true, then you have nothing.